just love these chairs? There we go. Okay, so a question I get asked all the time is what I keep in my spares box. So I did a video quite a while ago actually of what I keep in my rear drawer under the tray there, and there were a whole bunch of comments saying, what do I take in my spares box when I go on a trip? Especially with the kind of car I've got and the modifications you make, there's certain things that you should take with you to cover all bases. What's been in here is something that I've had with me for ever since I did that first trip to Cape York. So back in season 1 of Chasing Lions, I had the spares box with all the gear I put in it, and since then there's only been sort of minor changes, tweaks here and there of what I've actually taken with me, because the stuff that I took on that first trip seemed to pretty much cover everything I needed, that in conjunction with what was inside the drawer. So in here is no tools, nothing like that. This is purely spare parts, liquids, solvents, that kind of stuff to fix anything on the side of the road basically, and any spare parts that are required which you may not be able to access easily, and common things that break. So without further ado, let's get into it. So for a start, this is an army box. It's a steel case. It's lasted forever, and because it's metal, it's never really going to get damaged or damage the things inside of it. So it's worth getting something sturdy that you're going to keep with you when you put these spare parts inside. So first things first, always keep a bunch of spare hoses with me. So this can be used for siphoning things out, changing hoses, because one thing that can wear easily are rubber hoses. One way it can happen is through just wear and tear. They start cracking, splitting, leaking. Another way, which is quite common when you make modifications and especially with engine conversions, is running different hoses. There's a lot of the time they ended up rubbing against a chassis or something like that, and they don't become an issue until you get on those corrugated roads and they wear through and you get a leak. So having a spare bit of hose, I've got a few different sizes here. That means if there's any leak down the road, you can actually replace it and get yourself going again. It doesn't carry cable ties with them. That's for pretty much holding the whole car together if it comes to that. Now this stuff here is called Fixall. Now it serves two purposes. One, it's like a glue when it sets, and two, it's a sealant. So if there's anything that needs to be sealed up, glued, whatever, I can use this. Now it can be used on radiators, on hot equipment, as well as just little brackets and things here that may snap off or break, say on a canopy or a door latch or something like that. Even your window seals, it can seal up. So having just one tube of some sort of sealant or glue can be really handy on the road, and I've used that many times. Basics when it comes to servicing: if you do spring a leak in something or a hose comes loose, I have some power steering fluid with me, which can also be used for, actually what's it used in? Transmission fluid. So because I've got the auto now, power steering fluid, transmission fluid, this actually can be used in my brakes as well. And it has stop leak in it. So if the reason it's leaking and you're losing the fluid, at least this might have half the chance of stopping that leak. Also just some standard engine oil if it starts burning oil or if there's a leak as well. I've got something to top that up. And just some standard gear oil, which is used for the diffs, and if you've got a manual, that's what you'd use in your manual gearbox as well. Another super handy thing that a lot of people probably would oversee is just a very bag of nuts and bolts. So I've got different bolts, washers, nuts, spring washers, flat washers, just literally a handful of different sizes with me, different lengths, different threads. And whenever something rattles loose or falls off, even whether it's a light bar or whether it's a steering pump or something, that happened to me recently actually, and I found the bolt to put it back together in this bag. So just having a handful of nuts and bolts will really come in handy when you're on the road. Another thing that can be used for all sorts is sort of like cable tie, but this is what you call paracord. Now it's paracord because it's the cord they use when you go parachuting or parasailing. Like this holds someone in the air, so it's strong and it's not going to stretch, break or fray. So having that cord is good for fixing things, whether it be steering joints. If your panhard comes loose, you can tie it up with this stuff. So I haven't used it yet, haven't needed it thankfully, but it's there if I do. Just a can of WD-40 to get those rusty bolts loose. That's something that I found I needed on the first trip, didn't have with me, so now I carry it. Now I've got some electrical stuff, so just some heat shrink, which isn't really required. I've got some heat shrink, some cables as well, got some split tubing, some electrical tape. Now this is double-sided tape, which can be used for obvious reasons. This actually isn't tape at all. This is like a sealant, I don't know what you call it. It's kind of like a tape, it's sticky, but it's made for like sealing water, which I use when I had a hose burst, and then the only hose I had was slightly bigger than that diameter, and I used this to wrap around the fitting, and then it made that hose seal again. So that pretty much got me out of that time, and this is just what's left over, and I keep carrying it with me as well. Valve cores, so obviously if you get a flat tire, you might have a valve core that's leaking, or if you deflate your tires, you might lose one if you use those type of deflators. So just have that bag with me. as well as some nipples. Now these nipples can be used for different steering joints. I know my pan-hardened tie rod uses these kind of nipples. It's the same one that's used on like your brakes, if you want to bleed your brakes. Drive shaft unis, they're all on there as well. So just basically a bag of different nipples, so if one gets damaged, knocked off, and you lose that fluid or that oil and grease, you can replace it. Then we've just got some standard sealant. This is just gasket maker. That's pretty self-explanatory. Anything on the engine that comes apart and needs to go back together, you'll need some makeshift gasket. And this is Aerolite, which is a similar thing. It's like a gasket glue, but for electrical stuff. So if you need something that's got electrical around it and you don't want it to be conductive, Aerolite's really good for that. Now this stuff is called Rapid Fix. Now Rapid Fix is a 2-part adhesive and it is ridiculously strong. Basically you've got a powder and a liquid. When you join the two together, they kind of set instantly and you can build it up. So you can actually use it to fill holes, join cracks together, stop leaks, anything like that. If a little button snaps off somewhere, you can glue that back together with this. Where have I used it? I used it, you can even use it on hoses, like a radiator hose that's got a burst leak in it. You can actually join that back together with this stuff. So really awesome stuff, and I always keep that with me. It's like 20 bucks. This, I don't know how it got in there, but it's basically a latch, which would come in handy one day. I'm sure it's one of those things, if I take it out of here, I'll probably need it. But it's just a latch. If something flies open or a door breaks, the linkage or whatever, I can just text through one of these back on and it will keep the thing sharp. Some bearing grease. So I always keep some bearing grease, which can be used for standard grease, obviously for anything that you need to lube up or keep water out of. But obviously for your wheel bearings as well, as if you're towing a trailer too, you can use it for that. Trailer, it's not in this box at the moment, but I do carry spare hubs and bearings for the trailer as well. That's very important, which I found out the hard way. It wasn't really a bearing, it was the whole leaf spring destroyed itself. So a bit different, but you know what I mean. Speaking of bearings, I've just got a set of spare wheel bearings for a patrol, the inner and outer bearing, just in case. Like, bearings are one of those things that can fail at any time, and having a spare set is so easy just to grab from the shop before you leave. But if you're in the middle of nowhere and a bearing fails, you can't go anywhere and you won't be able to find one easily. So keep them with you with some grease. Now we're getting some specific stuff with the Nissan Patrol. They've got a special tool that you're required to take the bearing race locator thing off. Up behind the hub there's like a little disc and you need this tool to undo it. You can do it with a screwdriver and smack it with a hammer, but like obviously not recommended, so I just got one of these and keep it with me. I got some P-clamps. That's what I was saying with the hoses. If you find one that splits or leaks because of it rubbing, you can use a P-clamp to fix the new one there so it doesn't happen again. G-clamp is for obvious things, just holding things together while you're fixing it, while you're welding it, or even just to leave it there to hold something full stop. I just have a G-clamp with me, which comes in handy. Now with the LS spark plug leads, you won't have this in a diesel, but I just keep a couple of spare leads with me in case something dramatic happens with them, it gets cut, burnt, whatever, as well as a couple of spare spark plugs. So for the same reason, if something fouls or breaks and it starts missing and it's the plug, I've got a couple of spares of them. Another thing that I don't really need, USB charger. Interesting. Thermostat, now they can either jam, which I've had happen to me before when I was in Cape York, I think it was, or was it Carragini? Maybe it was the second season of chasing lines through Carragini. I had one of these, it was getting hot, turns out it stopped working, jammed shut, ended up having to pull the thing out and run an open circuit, which gets you going again, but then it ran too cool. So this is one that I bought at the same time as getting the new one, just so I've got a spare, so if it does happen again, I'll have a new thermostat. Here's some thread sealant, similar thing if you've got a bolt that requires sealing, something in the engine, something in, not your suspension, that won't need it. Actually use it on your hubs, that's one place that you do need it, is when you do those hub bolts back up, you don't want water going down the screw hole into your hub and destroying the grease, so you use that as well. That's the top for it. This is just a spare connector for my intake, it's a 4-inch, so anything that comes loose, falls off, rattles, I've got a spare connector because you don't want to get dust into your engine obviously. Spare fuel pump. A common problem on the patrols is the sub-tank fuel pump can fail. So if you've got like 90 litres of fuel on your car that you can't use, it's pretty annoying, and a lot of the time the range you predict for, you need to get to the next destination, so having that spare pump will get that fuel back into your main tank. And then same for the main pump. One thing, especially with mine having the high performance pump in there, I don't want that to fail and not be able to get another one. So I always buy two when I change my fuel pump, so I've got a spare of them as well, which has happened before. It wasn't the pump that failed, but the strainer got full. A lot of dirty fuel out in the outback can fill up that strainer and then overwork the pump, heating it up, making it fail. And that happened to me coming back from a trip up to Moore River, which wasn't too far out of Perth, but I did literally pull the sender out of the tank on the side of the road and fix it this way. And then the last thing, which I actually bought like today, was a spare alternator, because one thing, if your alternator fails, there's that much electrics on a four-wheel drive with your fridge, your freezer, all your food, all of that will go off if your alternator fails and your battery goes flat. So always take a spare alternator with me, especially going through water crossings and stuff. It's one of those things that will not like water if you go through it. Toyota people will understand this. They're down low in the engine bay, they fail all the time. So a spare alternator. Another thing that I'd take if you're an automatic is a starter motor, because if your starter motor fails, you can't go nowhere. But if you got a manual, I wouldn't worry about that, because you can always push start the car using the clutch as well. And that is pretty much the bottom of my spares box. Now, I haven't been away since Carragini, so I may have pinched a few things out of here since then. But basically, I'm literally about to hit the road to go over to Queensland from WA in about a week's time. So I'm kind of starting to just get everything organized again. So I think I've pretty much got most of it covered. If I have forgotten anything, please comment below. What's something you take with you when you go four-wheel driving, when you go on a long distance trip for your spares parts box? I'd love to see below, because it may be something I need and I haven't got here. So please let me know. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video, and hopefully I answered some of those questions that were asked in the last video that I did on my rear drawer. Now, if you want to see that one, I'll put a link down there below as well, so you can see what is in there, which is probably anything that you see here that might not be here. And you're like, Sam, you must have one of those. It's in that drawer. Example, serpentine belt. I got two of them. They're in the rear drawer, not in here, but it is a spare part. Anyway, I'm gonna pack this up, get it back in the car, ready to hit the road next week. I'll see you guys in Queensland very soon, but by the time you're watching this, I'm probably already there, so give us a yell, say g'day, show us some of the local tracks. I need some people to show me around the place, so let us know, and I'll see you in the next episode. All right, guys, I've got two quick announcements. Number one, I'm gonna be at the Brisbane National 4x4 Outdoor Show Fishing and Boating Expo in March. Now, the details are on the screen below. I also have a code BNB20. So if you want to grab some tickets and save 20%, I've got a link down in the description there. We can go and grab some tickets, pre-enter, and I'll see you down at the event. Number two, this is the first time I've announced this, Victorians. I have finally put together the Melbourne Show Your Dirt event. It's on the 4th of April, so it's a chance for you to bring down your four-wheel drive and put it on display. It's a public show and shine event. There'll be food vans, the Built Not Bought truck will be there, there'll be music, there'll be different categories for judging as well, and we're also doing a raffle to raise money for the bushfire relief. So I hope to see you down there. The details for that will be down below as well. There's a Facebook event page, and I hope that you guys can come along and enjoy the afternoon.